The Rundown with Carrie Saldo podcast is funded by Armbrook Village Senior Living in Westfield, offering assisted living and compass memory support with evidence-based treatment for those with memory loss. More at armbrookvillage.com.
This is The Rundown, your weekly news and review from Western Mass. I'm Carrie Saldo. Good morning. It's Friday, November 22nd. Here today to help us run, not walk, through the week's news, NEPM news reporter Nirvani Williams. Columnist and reporter with the reminder, G. Michael Dobbs, known to us all as Mike, and principal at RMC Strategies, Ryan McCollum. Good morning to all of you.
Morning.
Good morning.
Later, we'll discuss the latest on the push for passenger rail in the 413 and the impact of a potential $1.4 million buyout coming out of the UMass Athletics Department. Thoughts on that or anything we chat about here today on The Rundown, give us an email, therundown@nepm.org. Nirvani Williams, we're going to start this morning with a story that you reported for NEPM. The headline, Western Massachusetts immigrant advocacy groups prepare for possible end to federal program. The federal program referred to in that headline is the Temporary Protected Status Program. Folks have likely heard of TPS being talked about a lot in recent weeks because President-elect Donald Trump and Vice President-elect J.D. Vance have both suggested either scaling back or ending the program, depending on the way they spoke about it. Little history lesson here. Let your minds roll back to 1990. According to the Library of Congress, that's when George H.W. Bush enacted the TPS program. In brief, it permits citizens from designated countries to work in the United States with the promise that they will not be deported. Currently, there are 17 countries that qualify for TPS, and the Homeland Security Director decides which countries are eligible. Nirvani, President Trump tried to revoke TPS in his first term, was not successful. What are the advocates who you spoke with this week saying about whether or not they're taking this more seriously than the last or where they're landing on this?
Totally. I mean, they said that a lot of experts and advocacy groups are really concerned, really scared right now, even though during Trump's first term, he vowed to end TPS. It was stopped by a lot of lawsuits. And these experts also noted that then Attorney General Maura Healey had a lot of lawsuits to stop this sort of wave of anti-immigrant proposals that from the Trump administration. So she had a heavy hand in that. And experts are saying that they're hoping she could help in this case if he decides to do something a little bit more drastic. I mean, this time around, there is a more conservative wave. So experts are saying they're unsure how judges are going to react to these potential lawsuits against the Trump administration's policies, specifically how the Supreme Court, which is leaning right, is going to react if it gets there. So there's a little bit more urgency for immigrant advocacy groups to get resources together to protect current TPS applicants staying here and specifically in Western Mass. There are many Haitians who are here under TPS, if not all of them, and people from Venezuela and Afghanistan. So there's a little bit more fear, I think, this time around.
Among the people you spoke with, Sarang Sakavat, am I saying his name correctly?
Yeah, totally.
He's with the Massachusetts Immigrant and Refugee Advocacy Coalition. He pointed out how this national program could have real implications here in Massachusetts.
Let's say the parents do wind up in detention. What happens to the children? Who's supporting those children? Who's paying for those children? That's all going to fall on the state if there's U.S. citizen children.
Mike, Ryan, thoughts on that?
Go ahead, Michael. I was just going to say this is our first wave of all of this discussion about, quote unquote, migrants, immigrants, et cetera, et cetera. And what I find interesting is that these folks are here legally.
Yes.
They're in a government program. They're here legally.
Working legally.
We're
as
not
well.
talking about people who have crossed the Rio Grande. We're not talking about people who have stayed in the country because their student visa expired. We're talking about folks who came in legally. And for me, what my biggest fear is that despite good reporting, people who are concerned about this are going to lump all of this into one big ball of wax, and they shouldn't.
No, they already do, and it's a tactic by the right? So they're calling folks who are here legally illegal all the time. In other words that I don't even repeat. I think back to your point, there was a study in 2020, 2/3 of the folks who were here on TPS had U.S.-born children. And there was something like 70% have lived here more than 20 years. And so it does talk about a broken immigration system. It is called TPS. It's temporary. So where's that path to citizenship for these folks?
Well, currently through TPS there isn't, and that has been one of the ways I think that TPS has endured, right, is the promise that this is only temporary. I think I mentioned that the 17 countries that are currently eligible for TPS, those countries, the program expires for those. It's kind of a running clock, but somewhere between 2025 and 2026, depending on the country. And according to the research that I did, the Homeland Security Secretary calls the shots on this one, right? So conceivably, following law, whoever is leading Homeland Security right now, it's tapped to be South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem, who's been nominated thus far. She could give 6 months' notice to the country and say the program will elapse in 6 months and be within the full rights of the law to let these programs go. The other interesting thing that came up for me when I was looking back, January of 2021, President Trump used a different program to help protect Venezuelans from deportation. He used the Deferred and Forced Departure Program. So we've seen sort of different information from Trump himself on where he stands on some of these. So to me, maybe that's a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel here, that he might see some room to allow some space for this. Maybe I'm being too optimistic. I think
it's because Venezuela was a socialist country, and so he was able to put them up as evil, right? And he uses Venezuela often to say we're going to turn into Venezuela, etc. So he can't speak out of one side of his mouth. Well, he can, and he does. But on this topic, he seems to speak. He sees the same. Consistent. He tries to stay consistent.
Just one more thing before I move us along. On a related note, the Daily Hampshire Gazette's Scott Merzbach and Jill Kaufman from NEPM reported this week that some colleges and universities in Massachusetts, including UMass Amherst, have issued travel advisories for their thousands of international students and staff, saying that if you leave the country over the coming winter break, come back before Donald Trump takes office in January. They're concerned about that. Any thoughts on whether this is kind of some ado about nothing, or if there's legitimate concern here?
I mean, I think UMass's administration giving international students this advice makes sense. This is a really fearful time for many who aren't U.S. citizens, and these students are really concerned because of the last time during his first term when he issued an executive order with a ban from people from Muslim majority countries. There was, even though that order was revoked, there were a lot of people who were in these countries who were extremely confused and unsure whether or not to come back and if they could come back.
And it did cause some delay and
ton of delays.
Other assorted chaos as a result.
Absolutely, the chaos. And I think, for the administration to try to prevent that kind of chaos and try to give their students some peace of mind makes sense, especially the students who are here under a work visa too. I think there are a lot of concerns about what he's going to do there and how he's going to prevent
certainly
people.
An ongoing issue, and we'll keep talking about it here on the Rundown. I'm going to move us on to our next topic for the morning. Proponents of passenger rail across northern Massachusetts made some noise on behalf of that project. This week, supporters gathered in North Adams and Greenfield on Monday to raise awareness and show support for this idea. We saw Sten Spinella from the Berkshire Eagle reporting on this, as well as Jim Kinney from the Springfield Republican and our own Adam Frenier here at NEPM. There's not been passenger train running along the Route 2 corridor in western Massachusetts since the late 1950s. State transportation officials are expected to release a final report on the idea in the coming weeks. Mike, I hope I'm not speaking out of turn here, but you might be the only one in the room with the unique perspective of having been around in the 50s when that Hoosick Tunnel train was running.
Listen, I'm only 70, all right? I was born in 1954, so let's...
You were 4 years old on that
Yeah,
train.
there we go. Okay.
You were a young one.
Okay, so I just wrote a column for the Reminder about the announcement that Congressman Neal made a couple weeks ago about commuter rail and increasing commuter rail here in the Springfield, Worcester, Boston corridor.
Which is the West-East Rail, which Joe Comerford calls Southern Tier. Just to
Right.
keep all of the different tiers sorted.
I'll try to be really brief on this, but the bottom line is, over the years since former Senator Eric Lesser suggested all this, the service has diminished and diminished and diminished. So it's not going to be high speed. They're talking about 2 additional trains a day, which means there would be 4 Amtrak trains that would go through this corridor daily. And all of this is based on ridership predictions, which is based on population. And I'm not saying that there shouldn't be Northern Tier rail. The question is, they're going to judge it by the potential for ridership. And unfortunately, the population of our counties, Berkshire, Hampshire, Franklin, and Hamden, tends toward the southern. And I don't think that they can make the numbers work, especially since they haven't been using these tracks for passenger service since I was a wee lad and a beardless youth. So seriously, it's going to be numbers and potential for ridership. I don't think they got it, and I'm sorry.
And I think advocates, though, they're still in this for the fight. They're still in it to say this is important. Among those, State Senator Joe Comerford, who pointed out West-East Rail was a bit of a pipe dream until people advocated and pushed for it. So she's optimistic that Northern Tier Rail is still possible.
The Southern Tier Rail was no until it was yes, right? And what was the difference? The difference was social and political will. The difference was people saying, wait a minute, we need access to this. This is completely not fair.
Social and political will versus dollars and cents.
Sure.
What are you thinking, Ryan?
Well, yeah, I mean, there was a lot of political will. I mean, there was talk before Senator Lesser, but Senator Lesser was the one who kind of pushed it really hard when he got into office. She said it was a pipe dream, and I'm still not sure what's going to happen, the Southern Tier. I know there's been a lot of talk about it. I know there's been money and studies going on, but like Mike just said, it's different. It's turning into something very different than what folks were saying they wanted, right? And they're adding stops on top of it. And so if it's going to take me 4 hours to get to Boston from Springfield on the train anyways, why are we going to take it? And that's why the ridership numbers start to go down. And so it's a tough one. And it with all the resources that we need and probably things drying up from the federal government for the next 4 years, Northern Tier doesn't necessarily seem like something that might have money devoted to it.
The Healy administration has shown some support for this. Ms. Tibbetts-Nuts, who's leading the transportation secretary, said that while they're taking the project seriously and that it would have a significant benefit to residents along that route, logistically expanding and reviving the rail service across the northern part of the state would be easier in some ways than what we're trying to do from Springfield to Boston, because it was once a passenger rail route, and we don't have to have that game of we need this easement from you to get to Boston. Northern Tier has that all lined up, so maybe there's a little bit more potential for that to happen. But again, the cost estimates of the 6 plans that are currently being bandied about, and as Adam Frenier pointed out, the final report will be coming out in the next few weeks. We're talking about $1 billion to get this portion of this next phase of the potential moving forward. So it's still quite a bit of money. And who knows, by the time we sort of sort all through this, maybe we'll be all living in a sci-fi land where we just push the button on the back of our heads and teleport
That'd be awesome.
to the destination
So cool.
that we need to get to. All right, we've reached the halfway point in this morning's rundown journey, so we're going to take a quick break. We're going to return to discuss UMass Athletics' decision to fire its head coach and why that move could cost it up to $1.4 million. Springfield residents being asked if police should have access to public school video camera feeds. And heading into the holiday season, we're going to take a look at some of the ways that you can help folks in need. This is The Rundown on 88.5 NEPM. I'm Carrie Saldo. We'll be right back. Welcome back to The Rundown. I am Carrie Saldo here in studio this morning with Mike Dobbs, Nirvani Williams, and Ryan McCullum. All right. UMass football coach Don Brown was fired this week. And before that you think you've tuned into SportsCenter here, I want to chat about this for a couple of reasons. It's not only a sports story, obviously relevant because UMass is a huge public university, but also a higher education story because of a scoop that NEPM's Sam Hudzig brought forth for us this week about the dollars and cents of this move. And full disclosure, the license for NEPM's main radio signal is held by UMass Amherst, and the news route operates independently. Ryan, just quick reaction to UMass Athletic Director Ryan Bamford's decision to fire Don Brown.
I mean, I think it was coming. He's 6-28, and this is a
over the course of the 2 years he's been back, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
He's 2-8.
What are those numbers mean?
6 wins, 28 losses.
Definitely.
And he's 2 wins, 8 losses this year. And he's a great example of how if you're very nice to the press, they'll give you a nice way to leave. I mean, people haven't even been calling for his head because he treats the press very well.
The players love him.
Mm-hmm.
They have been tweeting calls for support. One student in particular, his story stood out to me. Brown coached him when he was like 8, and now he's coaching him at the football level too. And Nirvani, don't be shy about that question. I don't know very much about sports either. Sam Hudzig gives me a primer every time I need to talk about sports.
Amazing.
I am
Well,
grateful for that.
that speaks to everything. We're not like it's in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, and we demand a winning program. We want a nice guy. We want to have a good time and feel different. It's not that fervent culture here. So he can get away with it. $1.4 million buyout. There's people in LSU who are calling for their coach to get fired. $62 million they would have to pay him the rest of his contract.
And so that buyout, as Sam Hudzig reported, is a result of he was fired from the program before his contract elapsed.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Mike, this is a public university. The guy had a couple years left on his contract. The season was going to be up in 2 more games, but that doesn't have the bearing on the contract. This money right now, the athletics department spokesperson did not have information for Sam about where that money would come from right now. What are your thoughts on this amount of money being owed?
I'm only barely more literate in sports than Nirvani is. However, as a proud UMass graduate, class of 1976,
Go Minutemen.
My point of reference is that football at UMass has always been a problematic event, a problematic program. So many people place so much identity on a university through its sports teams, and heaven forbid if you have a loser. And Ryan can certainly educate me on this. The UMass football team has never been this huge powerhouse team like other universities might have. We've had some great periods of basketball, but not football. And I think that when something like this comes up, I think Ryan's point is ultimately, what do you want out of the football program? Do you want something that is positive and entertaining and full of school spirit, or do you want the big success? You want to go to all of the tournaments. You want to be known as a powerhouse. And honestly, I think that's a discussion that someone at UMass ought to have about exactly what do they want from a sports program. Because I'll venture this opinion. They're never going to be a huge national team. Never.
Yeah. Well, so here's the thing, and folks have to understand it's a business now, especially college football. And there's a lot of consolidation going on to the point where there'll probably only be 2 conferences. And so the UMass has a put up or shut up point right now with football. Do they get like a hot young coach who's going to get them to win, and they'll win, in the MAC, they'll win, and will they be in a tertiary conference? So you'll have the 2 big conferences, would probably be the Big Ten, the SEC, where all these powerhouses go. And then you look around, you have BC, you have Rutgers, you have Syracuse. Is UMass going to elevate themselves to be in that kind of conference? If they're not, then football is really not a thing, right? And the problem with a hot young coach, as soon as they start winning, a bigger program comes and snatches them up. And so it's
because
put up or
UMass
shut up.
does not have as much money to pay that hot coach as, say, a bigger program might.
Correct.
And Dan Cullerin, the spokesperson for the athletics department, pointed out to Sam Hudzig that this was a really crucial time, that the timing here, like, I look at it as a someone who doesn't follow sports very closely. I'm like, there's 2 games left. Let the guy run out the season.
Right.
But Cullerin explained that there's all sorts of minutia going on behind the scenes, students deciding, are they going to stay? Students deciding, do I want to come play for UMass? So they needed to kind of quickly make this decision in hopes that when this deadline approaches sometime in December, that there'll be more
Recruits.
Yeah, there'll be
higher
more
level.
interest in the program. Do you think that that's going to work though? Because people see what's going on with the program.
Yeah, I mean, I do think. Sorry, Nirvani, if you're going to say something, but
No.
I think they pushed their chips to the middle of the table, to use a gambling analogy. I think they're all in. I think they're looking for that young coach who's going to come in and attract those players who, hey, you could go to Alabama or you could go to one of those other schools, but you're not going to play right away. But if you come to UMass, you'll play right away, and try to catch a little bit of fire. Again, these next 2 or 3 years with college football is going to determine the landscape for a long, long time.
And just one other point that I'll make before we move on. I think it's important to remember also the point of this entire thing is you're going to college. You're going to school for an education, and you're also there playing a sport. So there's...
Well, as a college football player, yes. I am a former college football player. You're right. But if I didn't play college football and I was just in college, there's people like me who probably wouldn't have stayed in there. So it was a way for me to get there and a way for me to stay. But yes, it seems like student athlete, it's become athlete student to some people.
This
All right.
was very helpful. Thank you all.
We're all learning together here on the rundown. Nirvani Williams, something that you reported on last week regarding the Springfield School Committee, it's now seeking public comment about its agreement to let the city police request access to live security camera footage in public schools.
Yes.
What's going on there?
Yeah, absolutely. So there was an agreement made by the Springfield School District in 2021 that allowed, with the police department, that would allow police officers to go in and request access to security cameras and live footage happening in the school. So
This would be an emergency situation.
in an emergency situation, right? In the event that there, might be a school shooter in the event. Yeah. But that agreement expired over the summer, and Springfield School Committee member Latonia Monroe Naylor decided, we should sort of field for public comment on this. Like, how do students, faculty, teachers, how do people feel about it? And then she held a public comment session last month, or this month, a few weeks ago. Oh my.
It's okay. We're all keeping track of it together. There's
Nice.
also one coming up, I understand, in
There's one
December.
coming up in December,
So
yes.
if people feel strongly about this. But do we have any
Absolutely.
sense of what people have said thus far?
Yeah, absolutely. There were a lot of students who were really concerned about this, especially at that first public comment session. And as you know, Mayor Dominic Sarno is on the Springfield School Committee. He's a board member, and Lawrence Akers, the new superintendent of the Springfield Police, was there as well. And students were really scared. They were nervous of the police. They said that they didn't trust the police, a lot of them. And they referenced the federal consent decree being, that the police are under this consent decree because of excessive force. They don't really trust them to be looking at this live footage. They also mentioned surveillance being an issue. And then Lawrence Akers, he got up in the middle of the public comment session and addressed these students directly and said, we don't want to monitor you. We don't want to just turn on the cameras and look and see what you're doing. We don't care. We just want to protect you and make sure that you're safe. But something that I found very interesting is that he also said, there's a lot of work for me to do to get you as young people to sort of trust the police again, to sort of trust that we're going to look out for your safety, look out for your best interests, and not hurt you. And he was like, he acknowledged that was something that he needs to work on and that his officers need to work on. And he also acknowledged that they're right, that some officers were, didn't handle their, were kind of in misconduct. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's refreshing to hear the new superintendent acknowledge and admit some of the faults of
Yeah,
the Springfield
I
Police
agree.
Department in the past, and people have some trepidation in allowing them, and I'm sure the parents do too. But
Yes, parents
you
as
know,
well.
to have the live feed if something terrible is happening. There's school shootings, but there's also school shootings in the sense of like mass
Well, there was
shootings. But
a-
there was a shooting at
Sci
Sci-Tech.
Tech.
Yeah.
Well, there was
Exactly.
the gun
Yeah.
that was discharged at Sci-Tech.
Right.
Thankfully, no one
correct.
was injured, but that does not downplay in any way, shape, or form how traumatic
Yeah.
that must have been for the students and staff
Yep.
and teachers and community members.
And the school to prison pipeline's a real thing.
Yes.
And so they have the police in the schools, where in other suburban places the police aren't in the school. So if you get caught with a little dime bag of weed, the consequences at a Springfield public school are very different than they are in the Longmeadow public schools, right? And so that's a real thing.
I just think that Larry Akers has got a huge amount of work ahead of him.
Yep.
I've interviewed him briefly once. He comes across as a practical, straight shooting kind of guy. He wants to address issues. I'm a little bit confused about what the real objections are here. If this is only going to be used for emergency situations, and this is in order to protect students, it is also in order to basically provide the evidence and the narratives so police can address something that happens. I'm very curious about the real objections to it.
That's a great question. And a lot of the parents were saying that they were just confused on what this was. They weren't clear on what the measures are or were. And this had been happening in the school system since 2021, and they had no idea. So I think one of the major concerns was just transparency, just being honest with the teachers and with the parents, and students about what's going on with their children, with the school, and how the police are involved in this way, instead of officers being in the school as just security guards.
So next steps here are the public comment session on December 12th?
Yes, at the Brightwood Lincoln School.
All right. Yeah. I just want to briefly mention that NEPM has been working all week on a hunger awareness week. We've had stories from the newsroom. The fabulous 413 has brought us stories about hunger in the region. And there's this aim to better understand the crisis, the impact it's having on our community, and what's being done to combat it. The thing I think that has struck me as I've been watching and reading and listening this reporting is that this isn't a scarcity problem, that this is a resource access problem, and it's experienced more often among families with kids because, as anybody knows who has kids, who has raised kids, it's expensive to do that. And just the importance of calling attention to this issue has really been top of mind for me this week. Anybody else?
It's something I hear about every day because my wife runs an emergency food pantry in Indian Orchard. And if you think that Wilbraham or Ludlow, with more solid middle-class population, she also serves those communities, Hamden, that they're immune to this, they're not. This is a problem that goes straight across every community in Western Massachusetts. I think some communities, of course, because of their population, have more of a problem. But yeah, and it's a continuing problem. That's the issue. It doesn't go away. It doesn't go away.
And it's such a shame, too, because there are so many local farmers and great local produce that's grown here that people just won't have access to now because of state programs getting cut, like the HIP program. And
it's not cut entirely, right? There's a reduction in the funds.
Absolutely, to $20, right? That will be
$20 a month for produce. Like, what do you get?
Exactly.
You know, like for a whole family, what do you get with $20 worth of produce? I mean, I'm sure they have SNAP benefits and EBT and other things but $20 isn't much.
Well, if you are interested in getting involved, the Hunger March is coming up. It's the 15th annual March for the Food Bank with the fabulous 413's own Monty Belmonte. He's going to step off the 25th. That happens November 25th and 26th with a goal of raising $500,000, the equivalent of 1.5 million meals in the community. It steps off Monday at 7 a.m. There's more information at nepm.org or marchforthefoodbank.org. And that's going to do it for the rundown this week. My thanks to Ryan McCullum, Nirvani Williams, and Mike Dobbs. The The Rundown anthem is provided by The Love Crumbs. Our director is Tony Dunn. Our board op this morning is Phil Bishop. Engineers are Betsy Langto, Bart Rankin, and Chuck Dubé. Production support by Ayu Suriwan. Have a great Friday.
Thank you.